The end-of-year company retreat was a topic of much discussion, but the final decision, championed by a vocal minority, was for us to visit the notoriously unsettling Spectre Peak. I had voiced my reservations, attempting to steer the conversation toward more conventional destinations, but one of my male colleagues, Ethan, was particularly insistent. He dismissed my concerns with a theatrical display of bravado, declaring that men were naturally inclined to protect women and that there was nothing to fear. It was only later that I discovered he had been simultaneously posting on an obscure online forum, referring to his female coworkers in derogatory terms and outlining a horrific plan to assault and murder us in the isolation of the mountains. It was a strange and unsettling parallel, as his violent intentions mirrored a line of thinking with which I was intimately familiar. As the year drew to a close, the company announced its plan for a mandatory group excursion. A few of the men in our small office proposed a trip to Spectre Peak, a location that had recently gained a reputation among those seeking macabre thrills. They spoke with excitement about the raw, untouched wilderness and the supposed sense of danger that permeated the area, even speculating about potential encounters with wildlife. Observing their eager expressions, I exchanged a look of deep apprehension with Sarah, the only other woman in our department. Spectre Peak was infamous, holding the state's highest record for accidents and disappearances, and it was widely rumored to be a place of paranormal activity. Official tours had been prohibited for years after a well-publicized incident where a group of adventure-seeking bloggers vanished while live-streaming their exploration. The idea of spending a holiday in such a grim location felt deeply wrong to me. I argued that it was an unnecessary risk, but my objections were met with irritation from Ethan. He slammed a file onto the conference table, his voice sharp with annoyance, as he accused us of cowardice. He insisted that with the men present, there was no conceivable danger, reinforcing his archaic view that their role was to act as our protectors. Then, his demeanor shifted, and a sly grin spread across his face as he leaned in to share the true motivation behind his choice. The budget allocated by our employer for this retreat was unusually large. A trip to a remote and undeveloped place like Spectre Peak would cost very little, leaving a substantial sum of money that, he proposed, could be divided among the employees as an unofficial holiday bonus. The room fell silent. Our boss, the well-meaning heir to a fortune, subscribed to a philosophy of living in the moment and often spoke against the drudgery of corporate life, which was his justification for replacing traditional year-end bonuses with this mandatory team-building exercise. Sensing he had captured everyone's attention, Ethan pressed his point. He had calculated the expenses and estimated that we could each walk away with a significant amount of cash, far more than any bonus we had ever received. When he asked for objections, only Sarah and I raised our hands. Ethan immediately added a condition. Anyone who chose not to participate would forfeit their share of the money. Sarah's hand went down almost instantly. With the matter apparently settled, he declared that we would depart on Monday morning, adding a pointed, contemptuous look in my direction, as he remarked that some people, living in luxurious apartments, probably didn't need the extra cash. His animosity toward me had been a persistent issue since he discovered my living situation. When I first joined the company, Ethan had been overly friendly, but upon learning that I resided in one of the city's most exclusive apartment buildings, his attitude soured completely. He couldn't reconcile my modest salary with my expensive address, and from that day forward, he made a point of isolating and antagonizing me. What he and my other coworkers didn't know was the secret of my apartment building. It served as a discreet community for people like me, individuals who specialized in eliminating society's most malevolent figures. Our rent was not paid with money, but with the bodies of predators and criminals. And Spectre Peak, the very destination he had so enthusiastically chosen, was our preferred, long-established disposal ground. The increasing number of bodies was becoming a logistical problem, and the residents of my building had already planned our annual cleanup trip to coincide with this exact time of year. The thought of my coworkers and my associates crossing paths in that isolated wilderness filled me with a deep sense of unease. After a period of intense deliberation, I decided to join the retreat, concluding that it was better to be present and manage the situation directly. The 4 bodies I still owed as my annual quota would have to wait. After a weekend of preparation, we were on a bus heading towards Spectre Peak early Monday morning. On the bus, Sarah and I were the only two women. While the others dozed, I discreetly offered her a canister of pepper spray I had brought. She looked at it, startled, questioning why I would bring such a thing and dismissing the idea of there being dangerous animals. I glanced around at the sleeping forms of our male colleagues and lowered my voice, explaining that the area was extremely remote, likely without cell service, and that as two women, we needed to be prepared for any eventuality. She seemed to grasp the implication for a moment, but then her expression hardened, and she pushed the canister back toward me with a frown. She insisted they were our coworkers and wouldn't harm us, her tone suggesting my paranoia was offensive. Her voice was louder than she intended, and Ethan, sitting in the row ahead, turned around to ask what we were discussing. I felt a surge of anxiety, but Sarah covered for me, claiming we were talking about a television show. Ethan then offered her a large bag of snacks, assuring her that he had researched the area and that there was no threat from wildlife in the winter. He made a show of promising to protect her with his life, a pointed exclusion that I did not miss. I had heard enough. I took my bag and moved to the very back of the bus, where I pulled out my phone and began browsing a secure encrypted network that we used to find and vet potential targets. The residency requirements at my building were strict. We could only eliminate proven criminals and predators. This network was a resource for finding them, a way to fulfill our quotas. As soon as I logged on, a familiar face appeared on the screen. It was a photograph of Ethan, taken that very day, with the bus window visible in the background. The accompanying text described his plan to bring his dumb bitch co-workers to Spectre Peak, boasting that he had already placated one with a bag of chips and that he and others planned to do whatever they wanted to us in the wilderness. He was inviting others from the forum to join. The post was gaining significant attention, with many users offering suggestions. A few advised against it, but he callously dismissed their warnings, stating that no one would ever find out in such a remote place. A cold dread washed over me. Just as I was about to investigate his profile further, the bus shuddered to a halt. As my phone screen went dark, I saw Ethan's reflection in it. He was staring directly at me with a strange, distorted smile. "What are you waiting for?" he asked. "Time to get off." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry as I looked out the window at my other coworkers who were standing outside and waving for me to join them. An inexplicable and profound sense of dread settled over me. If it were just Ethan, I was confident I could handle the situation. However, if all four men were involved in this conspiracy, the odds of Sarah and me escaping were dangerously low. My immediate priority became convincing Sarah of the danger so we could present a united front. I scanned the group for her and saw she was already encircled by the men. They had taken her luggage, and Ethan had his arm possessively around her shoulders. The knowing glances they shared confirmed my worst fears. They were all complicit. During our first break, I managed to pull Sarah aside and showed her the screenshot of Ethan's post from the dark web. I proposed a plan. We would lag behind as the group started hiking and then make a run for it, hoping the bus hadn't yet departed. Her expression shifted from disbelief to horror, but then, to my astonishment, she slapped my hand away, knocking the phone from my grasp. She accused me of fabricating the image to frame our colleagues. Her words left me speechless. She continued, her voice filled with a resentful edge, suggesting I was merely jealous of the attention she was receiving. She reminded me of how I had been the center of attention when I first joined the company and accused me of being unable to handle the shift now that it was her turn. Her eyes were filled with disdain as she pushed my phone back at me. She condescendingly offered to keep my little secret, but warned me not to try anything similar again, invoking a hollow sentiment of girls help girls. I stood in stunned silence, baffled by the absurdity of the situation. It was painfully obvious that the men were deliberately treating us differently to create a rift between us, and she had fallen for it completely. One cannot save a person who is determinedly walking into a trap. I could only accept her decision and mentally wish her well. Soon after, one of the men announced that he had found a wooden cabin, fully furnished and seemingly perfect for our overnight stay. I had no opportunity to escape, so I had to follow them, my heart heavy with foreboding. When we arrived, I froze. The yard, the cabin itself, It was the house my associates and I used for processing and disposing of bodies. My colleagues were thrilled, marveling at the fresh-looking paint and the lush, well-tended yard. A wave of sickness washed over me. The walls were covered in countless layers of paint to hide the bloodstains from our work. The yard, so full of blooming flowers and vibrant grass, was fertilized by the numerous bodies buried beneath the soil. Of all the possible shelters on the mountain, they had stumbled upon this one. I knew my fellow residents were scheduled to arrive for their cleanup duties at any moment, and the thought of these two groups meeting filled me with dread. As I struggled with my anxiety, Ethan called everyone to a table and poured cups of coffee. The aroma was comforting after the tense day, but as I raised my cup, I detected a faint, acrid scent mixed with the coffee. As someone experienced in various methods of incapacitation, I recognized it immediately, a powerful sedative. I felt their collective gaze on me as I calmly set my cup down, clutching my stomach and feigning a sudden illness. I excused myself to use the restroom, but on my way, I stopped by Sarah and grabbed her arm. Remembering her earlier selfishness, I chose my words carefully. I whispered that I had seen someone tamper with her coffee and that she needed to find a way to dispose of it. Seeing the serious expression on my face, she seemed to show a flicker of fear and nodded. My hope was that if she believed me and got rid of the drugged coffee, it would be a step in the right direction. I knew that against 3 adult men, having any kind of ally was better than being alone. That small hope was extinguished when I returned from the bathroom. I saw Sarah behaving furtively, and in a moment of terrible clarity, I watched her swap our coffee cups. An icy chill ran through me. I was suddenly immensely grateful that I had not revealed the entire truth to her. She was not just refusing to see the danger, she was actively participating in a plot against me. An individual so foolishly malicious deserved whatever fate awaited her. I resolved not to offer her any more help. When she saw me approaching, she quickly picked up her new cup, which was originally mine, and announced that she had gotten fresh coffee. She proposed a toast, then tilted her head back and drank the entire contents before staring at me expectantly. I smirked internally, sniffed my own cup to confirm it was untainted, and drank it down. Ethan and the others were watching us closely. I knew I needed to eat and drink to maintain my strength for the events that were sure to unfold. After a quick meal, I excused myself again, claiming I felt unwell, and went to my assigned room. To my surprise, Sarah followed me, feigning concern over my supposed dizziness and fatigue. I was tired of her performance. I turned to her with a cold look and stated flatly that I had never mentioned being dizzy or tired, asking how she knew. Her face froze, and she stammered an awkward laugh, claiming she had just guessed. She was clearly there to witness the effects of the drug she believed I had ingested. I thought about what was about to happen to her at the hands of Ethan and the others, and a feeling of revulsion washed over me. As pragmatic as I was about my line of work, I had no desire to witness such a brutal spectacle. I quickly gathered my belongings, climbed out the bedroom window, and began making my way down the mountain under the cover of darkness. I hadn't gone far when Sarah caught up to me, grabbing my arm and demanding to know where I was going. I shook her off forcefully, my patience completely exhausted. "I told you they were dangerous," I said. "If you refuse to believe me, then go back to them. I'm leaving." She clung to me, her voice rising in panic. "No, you can't leave." I shoved her away again. "Aren't you tired of this act? If you want to die, that's your choice, but don't drag me down with you." The push sent her stumbling backward, and the facade of concern on her face vanished, replaced by a vicious snarl. "You bitch," she spat. "You've been drugged. Where do you think you're going? Just because you were everyone's favorite for a while, you think you're a princess? This opportunity tonight was a gift from me to you. You don't get to just run away." Her grip was surprisingly strong, but I kicked her hard. Unexpectedly, she collapsed, her face flushing an unnatural red. The sedative was clearly taking effect. She glared at me defiantly and screamed, "Ethan, Mark, come quick! This bitch is trying to run!" Her voice was growing weaker. Panting, she finally seemed to realize what was happening. "Wait, I feel so hot, and my vision is blurry. I switched the cups. You were supposed to get the drug. Why is this happening to me?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because I was the one who was supposed to be drugged, you idiot." Footsteps crashed through the undergrowth nearby. I watched Sarah's face contort with terror. No, don't call them, she whimpered. I simply shrugged, covered my ears, and began scrambling up a steep, wooded slope. A moment later, I heard Ethan's angry voice from below. Damn it, how is it you? I was going to let the guys from the forum have you after we were done. Who knew you'd be such a slut, practically begging to be drugged? I don't really have an appetite for you, but since the other bitch ran off, I guess you'll do if I cover your face. Through the tall grass, I saw Sarah desperately pointing in my direction, but before she could speak, Ethan clamped a hand over her mouth and slapped her. Shut up, he snarled. We were just afraid she'd try to win you over. Sarah was beaten until her face was swollen and bloody. Crying, she mouthed two words at me. Save me! I felt no pity. Ethan told the other men to search for me while he turned his attention back to Sarah. You're ugly, he said, but your body's not bad. He took off his shirt, threw it over her head, and said, From now on, you're that bitch Amelia, got it? Then he sat on top of her and began punching her repeatedly, screaming my name with every blow. Bitch, you ignored me. You live in a fancy apartment. You ruined my plans. The sound of his voice, filled with such baseless hatred, ignited a rage within me. I was about to leave, but hearing him blame me for his own pathetic inadequacies was more than I could tolerate. Seeing that he was alone, I grabbed a heavy branch and walked back toward him. He was so consumed by his assault that he didn't notice my approach until I swung the branch down hard against the side of his head. He cried out and fell to the ground. Before he could recover, I stuffed my own sock into his mouth to silence him. I stomped on his stomach, returning his earlier curses. You bastard, I seethed with every impact. You criticize everyone. You touched my waist. You insisted on bringing us to this place. A moment later, I felt a warm wetness beneath my foot. He had urinated on himself from the pain. Disgusted, I stepped back and swung the branch again at his groin. Can't even control your own piss, I muttered. The impact was met with a sickening crunch. His muffled screams were barely contained by the sock. Realizing time was running out, I dropped the branch and turned to flee, but a hand suddenly grabbed my ankle. It was Sarah, her face a swollen mess. Please, she begged, save me. Take me with you. I looked down at her and feigned deliberation. But you called me a bitch, I said softly. Her eyes widened, and she scrambled to her knees. I'm the bitch. I'm the real bitch. I was blind. Please, I'm begging you, save me. They'll kill me when they get back. The noise was grating on my nerves. I nonchalantly picked my nose and flicked the result at her. So? What does that have to do with me? A coworker might save you, but I'm just a ruthless bitch who's only going to say bye-bye. I smiled and waved as I turned away. Her face twisted in a horrific grimace as she screamed. I kicked her away again and started to leave, but my leg suddenly buckled beneath me. A searing pain, like a knife being driven into my calf, nearly caused me to lose consciousness. Ethan, barely conscious, was grinning through a bloody mouth. If I'm going to die, he rasped, we die together. You're not getting away. The sound of the other men returning grew closer. I gritted my teeth, forced myself up, and limped into the darkness. A light rain began to fall, making the forest floor slick. The pain in my leg was excruciating, and I was leaving a trail of blood. I couldn't believe I had allowed him to injure me. I found a small cave and leaned against the wall, managing to build a small fire to ward off the cold. I pulled out my phone, hoping to call for help, but a message notification appeared. It was from Ethan. Didn't expect this, did you? I'm not dead yet. And look what we found in the cabin. The attached photo showed a woman moving a corpse, her face illuminated in a way that made her look exactly like me. My heart lurched. I remembered a previous trip here when a neighbor had found the victim's camera and taken some photos of us working. I hadn't wanted mine and had left it stuck to the cabin wall, never imagining someone would find it. More messages arrived. So that's how a little bitch like you can afford to be so rich, one read. You dare call the cops and we'll see who goes down. There are 3 of us. We'll find you. If you want to live, come back to the cabin. Maybe I'll let you live. I knew I couldn't involve the police. There were too many bodies buried here. An official investigation would be disastrous. But the idea that I would meekly return to be killed was laughable. Did he really think he could negotiate with me? I pulled a flask of cheap liquor from my bag and poured it over the wound on my leg, hissing as the alcohol seared the flesh. Just then, another message appeared on my phone, this one in a secure group chat with my neighbors. The custodians have arrived at Spectre Peak. Still meeting at the cabin? Another message followed. Can't do it today. Amelia said her company is having a retreat there, told us to steer clear. How's her retreat going? I silently took a photo of my bleeding leg and sent it to the group. The chat exploded with activity. A new message appeared a moment later. Change of plans, new prey has appeared, everyone meet at the base of the mountain. I had intended to simply survive this retreat, but these men were worse than animals. It just so happened that our building required 4 bodies from each resident by the end of the year to fulfill our rental agreement. I had been worried about meeting my quota, and now a solution had presented itself. After crudely dressing my wound and finding a sturdy branch to use as a crutch, I began making my way down the mountain. Halfway down, I heard quiet sobbing. It was a man's voice. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm useless. They forced me to do it. When you get to the other side, please don't come back for revenge. The voice was familiar. I peered around a large rock and saw my other male coworker, Mark. Our department consisted of 5 people, me, Sarah, Ethan, Mark, and a man named David. Mark was a quiet man in his early 30s who always seemed to follow Ethan's lead. Now, he was hunched over a freshly dug pit. Lying in it was Sarah's violated corpse. What he was doing to her body was so bizarre and stomach-churning that I had to slap a hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. Her body was covered in bruises, her face nearly unrecognizable. Yet Mark was kissing her, his actions a grotesque parody of affection. I couldn't stop a small, gagging sound from escaping my lips. Mark shot up, looking around warily. He grabbed a torch and began waving it in my direction. In my injured state, I knew I couldn't outrun him if he found me. Just then, I heard the screech of tires from down the mountain. My people had arrived. I had sent them photographs of my coworkers so they would recognize him. Gritting my teeth, I picked up a small stone and threw it at a nearby tree. The sound drew his attention, and as he raised the torch, illuminating his face, an arrow shot through the air and embedded itself in his shoulder. I seized the opportunity, grabbing a handful of mud and shoving it into his mouth as he opened it to scream. A few moments later, several figures in dark clothing and masks emerged from the woods. Hey, I can't believe I missed his head, one of them said. Amelia, is this the bastard who hurt you? Mark was trembling, the mud in his throat choking him. We can save you, I said, taking a deep breath. Trade the lives of the other 2 for yours. Are you willing? He nodded frantically. We tied him up and took him to another, more secluded cabin. After injecting him with a syringe I had prepared and splashing cold water on his face to wake him, I asked what he could tell us. His face was white with fear as he explained that Ethan and David had found weapons in the cabin and had set traps for me. He also confessed that they had placed a hidden camera in the women's bathroom, a fact I was already aware of and had anonymously reported to the police before we even left. I looked at him with boredom. Seeing me reach for a knife, he panicked and blurted out another secret. He claimed that our other coworker, David, was gay and was secretly in love with Ethan. He recounted a time he had borrowed David's phone and discovered not only homosexual pornography, but also a hidden album full of pictures David had secretly taken of Ethan. The information was unexpected, but incredibly useful. My info is explosive, right? Mark asked eagerly. You can let me go now, right? I nodded, untied him, and gestured to the door. We never go back on our word, I said. You're free to go. He scrambled out the door, a look of disbelief on his face. You're really just letting him go? One of my neighbors asked. I pointed to the empty syringe on the floor. That wasn't an anesthetic, I explained. It was a fast-acting poison. It temporarily numbs pain, but it will be fatal in about 10 minutes. I just wanted him to die a little farther away. The sky was now completely dark. I properly disinfected my wound and took some painkillers, feeling my strength begin to return. My neighbors were eager for action. There are a dozen of us, one said. Let's just go kill them. They knew the layout of the main cabin and its traps better than anyone, but I shook my head. You all wait nearby, I instructed. I'll go in myself. And I'll activate the hidden cameras. There's going to be a good show later. Once everything was arranged, I expertly bypassed the traps around the cabin and slipped through a window into the back room where, according to Mark, David was resting. The man on the bed rolled over at the sound. "Mark, what took you so long?" he muttered. The next second, I had a sharp knife pressed against his neck. He froze. As his eyes adjusted to the moonlight and he recognized me, he didn't dare move. "How did you get in here?" he whispered. The wound in my leg throbbed, but I let my hand go slack, dropped the knife, and began to cry theatrically. "I can't do it, David," I sobbed. "You should run." He was stunned by my behavior. "What are you talking about? I can't believe you were foolish enough to come back here." I shook my head frantically. "No, that's not it. Mark caught me and brought me back. Ethan was going to kill me, but Mark said something to him and he let me go. He said if I killed you, he'd let me leave." "Kill me?" David was bewildered. "Why would Ethan want to kill me?" I took out the phone I had taken from Mark and handed it to him. "Because Mark showed him your phone," I whispered, my voice trembling. "And he said something about you liking him. Ethan just exploded. He kept saying how disgusting it was and that he had to kill you." In an instant, David's face turned ashen. He snatched the phone, and as soon as he unlocked it, the secret photos of Ethan appeared. He knew that any straight man, especially one as violently homophobic as Ethan, would be enraged. He had already killed Sarah. Killing him would be nothing. I watched the play of emotions on his face and started crying again. "What do we do, David? He seems so angry. He even has a shotgun. Maybe we should run away together." Then I added the final, crucial piece of information. "I think I heard him say that even if you ran, he'd find your family and tell them everything." David was married with a 3-year-old daughter. At the mention of his family, the fear in his eyes was replaced by a cold, murderous resolve. He loved his daughter more than anything. The risk of losing her in a divorce was unthinkable. As his hands clenched into fists, I kicked the dagger on the floor toward him. "We can't beat him," I whispered. "We should run." But David stood up, his gaze fixed grimly on the door. "He's been beaten half to death. Who is he going to kill?" Just then, a knock came at the door, followed by Ethan's icy voice. "David, who are you talking to? Is that bitch in there? Open the door!" Before David could answer, I shouted, "We've decided to team up. It's 2 against 1. "Team up?" Ethan's voice was full of shock. "You dare to team up with this bitch against me? You want to die?" Hearing that, any doubt David might have had vanished. He gripped the dagger tightly as the door began to splinter under the force of Ethan's blows. I hid behind a cabinet as David silently positioned himself behind the door. With a final crash, the door shattered and Ethan limped in, his bandaged face a demonic mask. He saw me and immediately raised his shotgun. "Bitch!" he snarled. "This is all because of you." But as he stepped inside, David lunged from behind, plunging the dagger deep into Ethan's back. A horrific, animalistic scream filled the room. Ethan fell to the ground, staring up in shock. You betrayed me," he choked out. "I'll kill your whole family." "You dare mention my family again?" David roared, losing all control and stabbing Ethan's body again and again. In a final, bizarre act of rage or desire, he pulled down Ethan's pants and plunged the dagger into him from behind. The scene was so grotesque I had to turn away and vomit. With his last ounce of strength, Ethan crawled toward me. "Quick," he begged. "Call the police. Save me." I nodded seriously and pulled out my phone. "What's 911's number again?" I asked with feigned confusion. "I can't seem to remember." He stared at me, and the combination of excruciating pain and pure rage caused him to spit up a mouthful of blood. He died with his eyes wide open. Then, Alex's frenzied movements stopped. His bloodshot eyes turned to me. "Now it's just you left," he muttered, walking toward me. "Only you know what happened here." I simply snapped my fingers. Instantly, the dozen or so neighbors who had been waiting outside poured into the room, armed with a strange assortment of weapons, including a chainsaw. The small dagger in David's hand fell to the floor as he stumbled backward. "So many of you," he stammered. Is this fair? One of my neighbors laughed and revved the chainsaw. Right now, he said, fairness is in my hands. David turned and scrambled out the window, but his escape was met with a series of horrific screams from the darkness. We had brought specially trained dogs from our apartment building, their teeth filed to mimic the bite marks of wild animals. This absurd tragedy needed a plausible scapegoat, and so, besides me, every single person from my office who went on that retreat was gone. A week later, the police concluded their investigation. Following the clues I provided, they found the phones of Ethan and David, along with the other bodies. The case was quickly closed. The official story was that Ethan and his group had planned to kidnap their coworker, Sarah, who discovered the plot and injured Ethan. In a rage, Ethan killed her and forced Mark to bury the body. Mark, terrified, was then poisoned by Ethan. Later, when Ethan discovered David's secret photographs, he threatened to expose him, leading David to kill Ethan in a fit of rage before being mauled to death by wild animals while trying to escape. The public consensus online was simple: serves them right. As the sole survivor who had never officially signed up for the retreat, a fact corroborated by the bus driver, an acquaintance from my building who provided me with a solid alibi, I was cleared of any involvement. The company held a memorial service, but given the ugly details that had emerged, almost no one attended. I made a special trip, bringing stacks of paper money to burn for my former colleagues. I also brought paper offerings shaped like handcuffs, clubs, and vicious dogs. Learning to be a decent human being is a difficult lesson, I reasoned. They should have to continue their studies, even on the other side.